I decided to hit the road at night. There was no specific reason, just a strange urge to escape. The silence inside the car was oppressive. The radio had been broken since the last heavy rain, and the darkness outside was so thick that the headlights could barely cut through the path ahead. The road seemed deserted, isolated from the world, as if I were the only human awake at that moment. The monotony of the trip began to weigh on me. The tall, twisted trees along the side of the road seemed to form a sort of tunnel, but one in particular caught my attention. It was more crooked, leaning to the left, as if some invisible force was trying to rip it from the ground. I passed it and kept going. 10 minutes later, there it was again. The same crooked tree, the same deserted road. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, tired from hours behind the wheel. I took a deep breath and continued. But less than 15 minutes later, I saw something that froze my blood, an abandoned car on the shoulder, its dented, looking like it had been left there a long time ago. I passed it, speeding up a little more. Then it happened again. The crooked tree, the dented car, everything exactly in the same place. I looked in the rearview mirror, trying to find some explanation. It was as if I were trapped, repeating the same few kilometers, like the road was playing with me. And that's when I saw him. At the side of the road, a figure stood, motionless. A man, or something that looked like a man. His face was pale, and his eyes, something about them sent a shiver through me. They were empty, as if he wasn't really there, just a lost presence, wandering. I drove faster, trying to get away, but after some time, there was the tree again, the dented car, and the man. Closer this time, his face still fixed on me, his eyes following me, even when I could no longer see him in the mirror. My chest tightened with a growing sense of panic. Whatever that thing was, I knew it was getting closer. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I could escape from this road that seemed determined to keep me forever. My mind was racing. Every time I passed the crooked tree, the dented car, and that figure by the side of the road, my heart beat faster. But the worst was yet to come. It was subtle at first. A faint whisper, almost imperceptible, coming from behind me. I tried to ignore it, blaming it on the wind sneaking through the cracks in the poorly closed windows. But the sound persisted, slowly growing, like a muffled voice trying to speak to me. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but it was there, clearly there. Then came the sound of breathing. Heavy, irregular, like someone struggling to catch their breath. My stomach turned. The sound wasn't coming from outside, it was inside the car. My whole body froze, and my instinct was to check the rearview mirror. For a split second, I swear I saw someone sitting in the back seat. I couldn't make out a face, but there was a shape there, a shadow that vanished as quickly as it appeared. I turned around, expecting to find something, or someone, but the seats were empty. My breathing quickened, and the steering wheel felt like it was slipping from my sweaty hands. The feeling that I was no longer alone in the car grew. Something was there, even if I couldn't see it. Every minute that passed, I felt a slight pressure next to me, as if something was settling into the passenger seat, silent, waiting. Then, in a moment of pure terror, I nearly hit something. I slammed on the brakes so hard the car skidded on the road, throwing my body against the seatbelt. I got out of the car, heart pounding in my chest, expecting to see some animal or maybe a piece of wood on the road. But the road was empty. And that's when I saw the marks. On the hood of the car, there were handprints, smeared with mud, as if someone had pressed their palms against the metal, dragging their fingers across the surface. My blood ran cold. Those marks weren't there before. And whoever, or whatever, it was now too close. I ran back to the car, panic taking over. I knew, at that moment, that I was no longer alone. And the worst part, I had no idea how to escape. I was driving aimlessly, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands, trying to find some end to this cursed road. The GPS flashed a blank screen, unable to find any signal. I was trapped somewhere between reality and a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. The fuel was almost gone, and the darkness around me seemed to grow denser, suffocating. The trees, the dented car, the same cursed sequence of things. Everything repeated, without pause. The fear was like a slow poison, seeping into my mind with every minute that passed. The figure that haunted me at the side of the road hadn't appeared in some time, but I knew it was close. I could feel it. The air inside the car was heavy, thick, as if someone was breathing next to me, invisible and silent. I was already losing my mind when, without warning, there he was. In the middle of the road. The figure stood still, motionless, his empty eyes fixed on me. I slammed on the brakes hard, the car skidding to a stop just a few meters away from him. The silence that followed was deafening. My chest rose and fell quickly, and I could barely think. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me. The terror paralyzed me, but something worse was coming. Without opening the door, without making a sound, he was inside the car. In the passenger seat, just inches away from me. His face was so pale it looked dead, and his eyes, those empty eyes, were pits of darkness. I couldn't breathe, my body frozen in absolute panic.
I have always dreamed of being free. In recent months, life had become unbearable, constant fights at home, a job that consumed me, and a heavy heart from unrequited love. Then, one night, I decided to escape. I took my car and plunged into the darkness of the road, with no set destination, just me and the cold wind coming through the window. The road was deserted, surrounded by tall trees that seemed to watch every move I made. The headlights of the car illuminated only a small portion of the path ahead, as if trying to fend off the shadows dancing at the sides. The more I drove, the more the feeling of isolation intensified. It was as if the world had disappeared, and I was the only living person. Loneliness began to suffocate me, transforming freedom into something oppressive. The sounds of the night were strange and unsettling. The car's engine rumbled, but behind it, there were whispers that seemed to rise from nowhere, mingling with the rustling leaves. Each bend in the road revealed moving shadows, making my heart race. It felt like something was watching me, following me. For a moment, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks, but the fear solidified when a car appeared behind me. I thought it was a relief, someone to share the solitude, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw that the car was at a strange distance. It seemed to be there, but when I accelerated, it simply vanished. Glances to the side and back left me uneasy. Every time I looked back, the car's lights were closer, and then farther away, like a macabre game that only I seemed to notice. I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, but a part of me knew it wasn't normal. Despair began to take over, and in an almost involuntary impulse, I decided to stop at a gas station that appeared ahead, illuminated only by a flickering sign that promised 24-hour service. The place looked like it was in ruins, but I needed fuel and perhaps some company. With each meter I approached, my instincts told me to turn back, but the freedom I sought pushed me forward. As soon as I entered the gas station, a wave of discomfort enveloped me. The air was heavy, impregnated with a sweet and sour smell that I couldn't identify, as if the place was slowly decaying. The lighting was dim, and the fluorescent lights buzzed, creating dancing shadows on the dirty, peeling walls. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of a soda machine that always seemed on the verge of failing. I approached the counter, anxiety pulsing through my veins. It was an abandoned place, and even with the weak lighting, something told me I shouldn't be there. The attendant appeared like a mirage, emerging from the shadows. He had an unsettling appearance, with sunken eyes and a smile that didn't reach his gaze. His hair was unkempt, and his clothes looked like they had been chosen from a horror thrift store. "Welcome, traveler," he said, his voice dragging out, almost like a whisper. "Can I help you with something? Fuel? A snack? Or just a story?" The way he asked the last question sent chills down my spine. There was something in his gaze that seemed to measure me, as if he knew more about me than I did. "I just need gasoline," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But he didn't move. Instead, he began asking strange questions that felt more like an interrogation than a casual conversation. "What brings a young woman alone to this place at night? Are you running away from something?" I felt a chill run down my spine. How could he know? "No. I'm just traveling," I said, hesitation evident in my voice. He tilted his head, his smile widening. Traveling is dangerous. Many things can happen on deserted roads like this. Did you know there have been many disappearances around here?" His words echoed in my mind like a sinister warning. A shiver ran through my body, and the feeling of being watched intensified. He moved a little closer, and the nauseating smell grew stronger. "They say the road speaks, you just need to listen," he murmured, his piercing gaze seeming to penetrate my soul. The conversation with the attendant dragged on, and as he spoke, my gaze wandered around the gas station. The atmosphere seemed to grow more oppressive with each passing second. When I tried to check my phone, I realized there was no signal. Despair began to settle in. I was completely isolated. When I looked at the door, the light from the flickering sign illuminated a glass that seemed thicker, almost as if something was trapped inside, hidden from my view. In an instant, the doors slammed shut with a sharp bang. The sound echoed like a macabre warning, and my heart raced. The attendant looked at me, his eyes shining with a sickly enthusiasm. The environment around me began to fill with noises, indistinct murmurs and muffled laughter that seemed to come from behind the walls, whispering dark secrets. I remembered the news I had heard about disappearances on that road, travelers who were never seen again, tales of a cult that lured the lonely into its grasp. Adrenaline coursed through my body like lightning, and the need to escape became urgent. "You don't need to worry," he said, his soft tone now transforming into something more menacing.
We decided it would be a great idea to take a road trip on that autumn night. The leaves of the trees danced in the wind, reflecting golden hues under the dim light of the moon. My girlfriend, Clara, and I laughed excitedly as the rural road unfolded before us, but as we progressed, the jokes began to fade. It was a beautiful place, but shrouded in a veil of mystery. Rumors of strange disappearances on that road were whispered by those who knew the area. As the road narrowed, a feeling of discomfort began to creep in. The silence around us was almost palpable, broken only by the sound of the car engine and the occasional rustling of leaves. Clara, ever the optimist, tried to keep the mood light, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. Then, without warning, the engine began to sputter. The car hesitated, emitting a distressing sound before slowing down and coming to a complete stop. Frustration quickly turned into panic. What should have been a fun getaway was turning into a nightmare. Let's try starting it again, I suggested, hope slipping away with each passing second. As Clara tried the engine, I looked out the window. That's when I saw it. A car parked at the side of the road, its headlights off, like a specter waiting in the darkness. The emptiness around us seemed to breathe. It must be someone having trouble too, Clara commented, trying to stay calm. An unsettling feeling that we weren't alone took hold of me. The vehicle was empty. The doors were ajar, and all I could feel was a chill running down my spine. As we approached, the silence became deafening. There was no one in sight, not a soul to explain the presence of that abandoned car. A feeling of being watched engulfed me, as if something or someone was lurking in the darkness. We returned to the car. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. The engine wouldn't start, and each failed attempt heightened my despair. Clara leaned over the hood, her eyes illuminated by the dim light we had. The silence of the night was unsettling, and the only sound was the wind blowing through the trees, which seemed to whisper dark secrets. Suddenly, a shadow appeared to our left, a figure standing out against the darkness like a materialized nightmare. A tall man, in dirty, disheveled clothes, approached slowly. His penetrating gaze seemed to pierce our skin, as if he could read our thoughts. Instant fear paralyzed me, but Clara, in a mix of curiosity and hope, greeted him. "Do you need help?" he asked, his voice rough and dragged out, as if it had been forgotten in a remote place. "Yes, our car broke down," I replied, keeping suspicion in my tone. "Do you know this road?" He smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, this road has stories. Many stories." His eyes gleamed with an unsettling fervor. "What brings you out here at night?" "It's not a good place for travelers." The questions began to get strange. He wanted to know details about our trip, as if he were evaluating our answers. As he spoke, I noticed strange sounds starting to echo around us, indistinct whispers that seemed to come from all sides, distant laughter reverberating in the shadows. "Have you heard about those who disappeared here?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "They say they still wander this road, looking for those who dare to cross their path." A wave of chills ran down my spine. Clara, noticing my discomfort, tried to laugh, but her laughter came out weak and nervous. The man seemed to know too much, as if he were watching our every move, every exchange of nervous glances. "Come on, we don't need to stay here." "We can leave," I said, trying to keep calm, but the feeling of being watched was growing. The darkness seemed to shift around us, and the shadows in the trees appeared to stretch, as if they were about to swallow everything. "Don't rush," he murmured, as if enjoying our discomfort. "The night is still young, and the stories have yet to be told." It was at that moment that I realized this was not just a casual encounter. There was something darker, something hiding in the shadows, waiting for the opportunity to reveal itself. The man was just the beginning, and I feared that the stories he knew were not the ones found in books, but rather the ones unfolding before us, with us as the unwilling protagonists. Panic began to overtake me. "Come on, Clara," I murmured, pulling her toward the car. We needed to get out of there, away from that enigmatic figure. However, when we arrived, the doors wouldn't open. I pressed the key fob, but nothing happened. The car was stuck, as if the road itself were holding us captive. "Why won't it open?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. I didn't know either. The dark figure approached, now more visible under the moonlight. His smile widened, revealing yellow teeth and an expression that blended malice and sadness. "You really shouldn't be here," he said, his calmness sending chills through my blood. "This road is not what it seems. It has an appetite for lost souls. Get out of our way!" I shouted, trying to open the door again, but the feeling of being watched intensified. The man leaned in closer, and I could see the scars on his face, marks of a past I didn't want to imagine. I am one of the few who survived," he revealed, his tone laden with desperation. "Many come and don't return. I've seen things that haunt even the darkest night. You cannot trust the road." Then, he looked back, and my heart raced as I saw shadows forming among the trees, as if the darkness itself were moving. They elongated and stretched, almost coming to life, as if drawn by the man's presence. "You need to leave now," he shouted, his voice echoing in despair. But it was too late. A biting cold enveloped the car, and I realized it wasn't just fear. It was a palpable terror, a force that seemed to want to keep us there. The road lights began to flicker, and distant laughter turned into screams. Clara and I exchanged glances, our faces pale with terror. The shadows were closing in, wrapping the car in oppressive darkness. I knew it wasn't just the man who was dangerous, it was everything around us. "Clara, try to open the door again," I ordered, adrenaline surging through my body. She pulled the handle, and in one last effort, I pulled too. To our surprise, the sound of metal creaking joined our despair. With a swift motion, the door finally opened, and we both jumped into the car, slamming the door shut. The man approached, but there was desperation in his eyes, as if he knew time was running out. "Go! Now," he shouted, his voice heavy with urgency. Without hesitating, I started the car and accelerated, the tires screaming as they hit the road. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the figure moving away, while the shadows seemed to recede, but a sense of relief had not yet hit me. The road we had traveled now looked like a nightmare to our left, and as we drove on, we vowed never to pass that way again. The sounds of laughter and whispers dissipated as we moved away, but the terror of that night would remain etched in our memories forever, a warning about the dangers that may hide beneath the shroud of darkness.